There are 9 rhythm patterns every beginner needs to know to play piano effectively, but to explain any of them, I first have to explain the concept of subdivision. So here we have a measure of 4/4, 4 quarter notes, very simple, counted as 1, 2, 3, 4, and then on the piano, of course, that's just going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and now we're actually going to get into subdivision. So now we still have our 4 beats here, they're right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, but because an eighth note only gets half of a beat, we now have to basically fit 2 notes in every beat, and we use the term and. It looks like a plus sign. So now instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to be counted 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. I still had my quarter notes counting out with my finger and then hitting the eighth notes like that. Now we're going to split it down even further to 16th note subdivisions, and then I'm going to explain when you might use 16th or 8th note subdivisions in your piece. But here we're breaking down each beat into 4 equal parts. So we still have our beats 1, 2, 3, 4, and we even still have the second half of each beat here, the ands. So 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4 and, just like that. So now we have to account for our missing notes, because now we're splitting each of those into halves, and we use this following term. So we have 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and So instead of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, it's now 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and. You still have to keep up with the beats of 1, 2, 3, 4, but now you're just putting in 4 instead of 3. So when should you use 16th note subdivision versus 8th note subdivision? Well, here it is. Here's the answer. Everybody asks me this. If you have any 16th notes in your song at all, it can be a 16th rest somewhere in the middle, you have to subdivide 16ths the entire time, even if you have quarter notes, because what that'll do is that'll make sure that you are playing consistently throughout the whole thing, and then when you finally get to that measure of 16ths, it's not going to be so jarring to move from just counting flat quarter notes to 16ths and back. If you don't have any 16ths in your music, maybe just eighth notes, you can probably get away with just using the eighth note subdivision. Speaking of eighth note subdivision, here we have the rhythm I showed you right in the beginning, the dotted quarter eighth rhythm, which is these 2 guys, and then I just added in some quarter notes to fill out the measure. Now let me show you how you're going to count this. So the first question I have for you is, how many beats does a dotted quarter note get? And you probably may know that it gets 1.5 beats. So how do we count that? Well, we use our eighth note subdivision as our friend. I have another question for you. How many halves? It gets 1.5 beats, right? In the dotted quarter. How many halves are in 1.5? So to answer this question, I drew our eighth note subdivisions down on the bass clef so we can compare them. And the answer to that question is 3, right? 3 halves of 1.5, because you have a half, you have another half makes a whole, and then another half to make 1.5. Remember that each eighth note only took up half of a beat. So this dotted quarter note is going to take up this eighth note, because that's half of a beat. It's going to take up this eighth note, that's another half of the beat. And it's actually going to take up this eighth note, that's another half of the beat. So this is going to be counted as 1 and 2, and then you're moving again on the and of 2. So 1 and 2 and then of course you would count 3, 4, or would I? Well, no, you want to be counting out your eighth note subdivision here. I should actually move these over so they're lined up, because that will help you count more accurately and consistently. So this rhythm is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So question, how do you count dotted quarters using 16th notes? Well, quite simple. Okay, so remember we said a dotted quarter gets 1.5 beats. Well, how many of these is it gonna take up? Well, I have a tip for you. It's the best tip of the whole lesson, I'm serious. When notes are beamed together, that means they equal 1 beat. So we know that it's gonna take up at least 1 E and a, right? Because that's 1 beat, but we need half of a beat left. So that would be 2 E as well, because this would be the other second half of 2, which makes sense because that's where the eighth note is. So it would be counted 1 E and 2 E and 3 and a, 4E and a. Remembering that you still want to subdivide this beat and this beat. Why? Well, so you can count more accurately. There's an alternative way to count that dotted quarter eighth rhythm, and we're going to use pineapples. Yes, really. So we're going to use the word pineapple, and let me show you actually how we're going to do this. You can actually count rhythms by associating certain words with them and certain syllables within the word. So you can use pineapple with the dotted quarter note, holding the dotted quarter for pine app, and then moving on pull. So pineapple pound cake, 1 and 2 and 3, 4. Just like that. Next, we got to talk about 16th note combo rhythms. Okay, 16th note combo rhythms is when you're basically having mixes of 8th notes and 16th notes, and there's quite a few you need to be aware of. So here's our first rhythm, the 8th to 16th rhythm. It looks like that. Now, this one's a lot simpler than it looks. We're still using 1E and a 2E and a type of thing. So here's our 8th note. This is where the confusing part is, because these are like kind of combined together, which, by the way, I said before, if these are all flagged together and they're all like connected, that equals one beat. So here we have 1E and a. Remembering that when you're subdividing by 16th notes and you have an 8th note, it's actually going to take up 2 of those, and then you'll move on and a. So it's going to go 1E and a. And then, of course, the rest of the rhythm would be 2E and a, 3E and a, 4E and a. But once again, it's 1E and a. I always like to internalize these rhythms, too. Instead of just going 1E and a. I like go ba, 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 ba. Because each rhythm has like a certain type of galloping to it or a certain type of cadence to it. So not only just try to count them or use maybe your pineapples to count them, but also be internalizing the rhythms as well. Next rhythm we have, just building on that, now we have 2 16ths and an 8th there. We can tell it's 16ths because they're double barred, and then you got 1 bar there. But all together they equal what? 1 beat, at least hopefully you said that. So now we know that we're using the 1E and a type of thing. So we have 2 16th notes, 1E, and then and a. It's the opposite. The other one we did 1E and a. This is 1E and a. Or to internalize it, bum, 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 bum. A little bit simpler there. So, of course, to play out this whole rhythm, this would sound something like this. 1E and a, 2E and a, 3E and a, 4E and a. And because I was subdividing by 16ths the entire time, playing these the right amount, even though they're slower than the other notes, was no problem. Whereas if I would have not subdivided, I would have had to just kind of guess. Okay, we have a new rhythm here. 16th, 8th, 16th. You can tell by how many flags are on each one, but all together they equal what? 1 beat. So of course we're using our 1E andas now. So on beat 1 is our 16th note. We're moving right on to E and. Keep in mind that the 8th note now takes up 2 of those syllables, because each syllable is worth a quarter of a beat. 2 quarters equal a half. And then you're going to move on a. So it's going to look something like this. 1E and a, 1E and a. Just playing that over and over again. Or to internalize it, bum ba, ba, bum ba, bum, bum ba, bum. Now playing out the whole rhythm. 1E and a, 2E and a, 3E and a, 4E and a. On to the next one, the dotted 8th 16th. This is the last combo pattern, at least with 16ths. So we have our 16th here, the double flag, and then we have an 8th note here, but it's got a dot on it. So dotted 8th note, and I'm sure that looks spectacular. There we go. And then together they equal what? 2 beats? No, 1 beat. So now we need to talk about how many beats are in a dotted 8th note rather than a dot. Remember, a dotted quarter note got 1.5. So how many does a dotted 8th get? So if you don't know, like say I'm gonna draw like a little example down here. So if you don't know, the dot will add half of the note's value back to itself. So the reason a dotted quarter note gets 1.5 beats is because it's 1 plus a half of 1, which is 1.5. So what about a dotted 8th note? Well, an 8th note gets half of a beat, right? And what's half of 1/2, a quarter, and then you have to use your math from school plus 1/4, make them the same. So a dotted eighth note, I'm sure this is the math you wanted to see today, is 3/4 of a beat. So how in the world are we going to count 3/4 of a beat? It's actually really easy using subdivision. So remember earlier when I was talking about 16th notes, 1E and a 2E and a, that each of those syllables equaled a quarter of a beat. And we need this thing right here to equal 3/4. So it's very simple, really. It's just going to take up 1E and, because each of those is worth quarter of a beat, and you got 3/4 here, and then you're moving on a. So this whole measure is going to be counted as 1E and a, 2E and a, 3E and a, 4E and a. Or to internalize it, ba, 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 ba. It has a certain type of cadence to it like the others. So you also want to try to internalize it. And moving right on to triplets, this is where things get interesting. So now we're not dividing into 2s or 4s, we are dividing into 3s. And a lot of people struggle with this, especially moving from 3s to 2s. And I have a little trick here for you to get used to that. So let's talk about triplets for a second. So now we're splitting each beat into thirds, and this is how we do it. So let's just write out our 3 or 4 beats here, rather. Can't count today. And this time we're not using and at all, because that won't work. That's only for counting into 2 equal parts. So I use 1 triplet. 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. And then I'm just going to play quarter notes in the left hand. 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. Rather than 1 and 2 and, it's 1 triplet, 2 triplet. So a little bit faster, but 3 even parts. So here I have an alternating rhythm between a triplet, an eighth note, a triplet, and an eighth note. So quite simply, this would be counted as 1 triplet, 2 and, 3 triplet, 4 and. But a lot of students ask me all the time, Tim, I really have trouble moving from, triplets, eighth notes, and back forth. So you're going to have to use our best friend ever, the metronome, set it to 4/4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then in time with the metronome, see, if you start out with eighth notes, right? 2, 3, 4, so go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now when you get used to that, try triplets. So move back and forth between those two, and then what I want you to do is, then we're going to make it real interesting. You're going to play 1 beat triplet, the next beat eighth notes, the next beat triplet, the next beat eighth notes. It's just like the rhythm I gave you on the sheet right here. So let's see if we can do that together. So here's our 4 beats. I always recommend you just kind of like let it play for a minute to internalize the rhythm. One triplet, 2 and 3 triplet, 4 and 1 triplet, 2 and 3 triplet, 4 and 1 triplet. So as you can see with the metronome, we were moving from triplets to eighth notes, and the metronome was actually keeping each of those beats for us, so I could shift between triplets and eighth notes, triplets and eighth notes, and using the metronome I could also hear when I was getting a little bit off, and then I could go back and make it more solid. So what I recommend you do at home is actually just to use the metronome and do what we did just now, alternating between triplets, eighth notes, triplets, eighth notes, so that you can over time really internalize what this sounds like. It also has an internalizing pattern to it, ba 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 ba, so that you can remember it a lot easier. Now if you're extremely unlucky, you've seen quarter note triplets. So how in the world do you count these? I'm going to be honest, you're not going to see these in your music a lot, but there is a chance you'll see them. So let's do this. So we now have 3 quarter notes underneath our triplet, which is a quarter note triplet. And the question is how many beats is this going to take up? Well, I want to give you a little hint. The amount of value that a triplet takes up is always like double whatever the note value is underneath it. So if these are quarter notes, you're not adding them together. If that's a quarter note, the total amount of beats that all three of those are going to take up together is a half note. Just like with the eighth note triplets, that they were 3/8 notes put together. Not really, but in this case. But they really took up the value of the next note up, which was the quarter note. So if you have quarter note triplets, it takes up a half note. So to count this, we're going to be counting actually 2 beats of 1 triplet, 2 triplet. We're using the same thing, but it works just slightly different. So we're counting at 1 triplet, 2 triplet, except instead of each of the notes in the triplet just taking up 1 syllable, they're going to take up 2 syllables. So this gets a little tricky, but you will get the hang of it. So instead of 1 triplet, 2 triplet, it's 1 triplet, 2 triplet. I know it sounds a little bit off-putting, but you'll get used to it. 1 triplet, 2 triplet. 1 triplet, 2 triplet. Let me show you on the piano. Hold on. 1 triplet, 2 triplet. And then 3 and 4 and. Probably use a metronome to make sure I'm getting into the quarters a little bit. But that's how you do it. You just say you would do 2 beats of triplets, but just 2 syllables on each one. Now I got another kind of combo rhythm for you right now. This is the 16th rest 16th notes. This is very easy to count because the 16th rest just gets 1/4 of a beat like a 16th note does. So we're still using our 1 E and except we're not playing on beat 1. So it'll go 1 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and So you want to kind of plan your attack on E instead of that beat. So you would like kind of tap your foot and then move on to the next note. That one's a little bit simpler. The opposite of that is 3/16 16th rest. So you would go 1 E and then nothing. So 1 E and 1 E and 2 E and playing out the whole rhythm. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and Next we have ties, another one a lot of students ask me about. So we have 4 quarter notes here, very simple, but we should probably still subdivide into 1/8 notes. Why do you think that is? Well, that's so we can count more accurately, because the longer you hold notes over, the more guess time that your brain has to do. So this is very simple. Normally this would be counted as 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, but this time we have a tie. A tie ties over beats. So this quarter note here tied to the other quarter note isn't just going to take up 2 and, it's going to take up 3 and 2. It's almost like a half note. Now you may be asking, why wouldn't you put a half note there? That's a very good question. Well, there are other uses for ties, as we'll find out in a minute. But this is how we'll play this rhythm. So it's going to go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now here's where ties really come into play. So here we have beats 1, 2, 3. I guess we'll just put ands in there. Why not? 4 and now we're tying beat 4, or 4 and rather, over with 1 and. So these will all be tied together into a single beat, or into a single holdover rather. So this is why you would need a tie, right, in an instance, because you can't draw a half note. It seriously won't let me do it. You can't draw a half note in between measures. So this whole thing would just be counted as 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Keep in mind that I held over from 4 and didn't press that note again for and. As our 9th rhythm pattern at the end, I actually have a really special tip for you. It's really, really useful when counting rhythms accurately. But before that, I want you to leave a response in the comments because I have a question for you. What rhythm patterns do you struggle with the most? Specifically, are there any rhythm patterns that we didn't talk about today that you struggle with? You probably will be surprised to see your suggestion appear in a future video where I maybe do a second part to this. Speaking of which, I promise you I have a special technique and I will not let you down. You have to watch this video to learn about it. It's called the attack point strategy and it's going to help you count rhythms a lot more accurately and with a lot less frustration. It's your piano teacher, Tim, here. Thank you for coming by. And I'll see you, yes, you, in the next lesson. Have a great day.